Hello, and welcome to this episode of Security Journal UK Leaders in Security podcast series. I'm your host, Millie Loughran, and I'm the Deputy Editor of Security Journal UK. In this episode, I'm joined with Ben Lee from GJD. Ben will be helping us break down the concept of layered security systems, what they are, why they matter, and how different technologies come together to create a stronger, more reliable setup. We'll also be exploring the crucial role illuminators play in boosting performance, reducing false alarms, ensuring cameras and detection systems work at their best. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, Millie.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today. So could you introduce yourself, your role at GJD, and give our listeners a brief overview of what GJD does?
Yeah, so I'm Ben Lee. I am a sales manager for North of England, Scotland and Ireland, and joined GJD just under 3 years ago. GJD has always been known for its external detectors, its lighting systems, and its illuminators, but has grown recently into more key solution providers for perimeter detection, long-range IR and white light, and ANPR solutions, with the recent introduction of a long-range LoRa system, which allows for up to 10-kilometre communication between wireless detectors and lighting. So yeah, it's grown a lot, and we've developed to accommodate the market.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. What is meant by a layered security system, and what are the building blocks used to create one?
Yeah, so I think a layered system has become more relevant since COVID time. There was actually a report done on ITV for this, but what it means is there's three key areas in my eyes as to how to defend a property or an asset in that sense. And what we're looking at is the perimeter is a first line of defence. And this is where we can activate a early warning system or an early warning deterrent. So that could be anything from a fibre perimeter fencing, detectors around the perimeter, and then lighting, white light, and even a speaker system to first try and prevent someone from even attempting to get onto the site. The key with this is that there's been a study that says that most intruders realise they have 10 to 20 minutes to do anything upon detection. So if we can get that early, we can then start that detection process, or that action process, as I call it, to get someone out to find out what's happening earlier than if it was close to the asset. So the second line is the area between the asset and the perimeter. So this is something maybe outside of a building. And that's where you'll find a lot of cameras come into use in this sense. You can use detectors as well, but a camera will be used predominantly to record what that intruder's doing. So we're trying to get an image and we're trying to confirm a detection. So this is a key area as well, where we can use this to then take that to court, or we can also acknowledge that that first line detection was a detection. And then the third and final one, which is inside the building or where the asset is generally you will find an intruder alarm or some sort of monitoring that can actually then alert. The problem with this is once they're in the building, then they're able to do whatever they want. So the key is, and I class them as first line, second line and third line defence. First line is perimeter. If you get that cuts that time down that they have to do anything on site. Second line will also give you an early warning, but you can also see what's happening. And the third line is that last line of defence that really is telling them that someone is coming out. So yeah, it's an interesting system, but it works. People do forget that first line of defence. Mm-hmm. And they just use third or second. That first line of defence, to me, is a key one, because that is where we're going to stop them from doing any damage.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So could you walk us through a real case study, what the problem the client had, how you assessed it, and what security solutions you proposed and implemented?
Yeah, so we've recently done one on site, and the brief was very different in what we generally get. So they wanted to protect a site without the use of man guarding. So certain aspects of modern world now has made it very expensive to man guard a site that isn't open anymore. So what they're looking at is trying to reduce that cost with your use of technology. It's sad times when that happens, but that is the way it works and the way we need to manage how we protect stuff now. So their brief was they needed a positive response to an alert, and they needed to reduce false alarms because it was going to be through a monitoring centre. And this was for a site that was 1.5 kilometres square. So it was a large area, and it was a factory and warehouse. So they were producing and storing precious metals. So they didn't want to take time in fitting cables. So they didn't want to disturb the site. And they also wanted to reduce costs. So they needed to put in a cost that was lower than the man guarding itself, and that would work. So the way we went about this is, as we would always do, site visits, check out the site. But it really shouted out to us that the LoRa gateway was going to be a system that would come into play. So this is a 10-kilometre LoRa technology, which allows wireless detectors to be placed around the site with no need for cabling. The benefit of this is they also wanted a camera system in place. So the LoRa system can integrate into the NVR to allow the alerts to then go through the system and go to a monitoring centre. It can also activate PTZs and static cameras to presets where the actual detectors detect something. So this then gave them a facility to put a cost in that was acceptable. And it also meant that they didn't have to price in cabling, different types of work that it may need to do. And it also then, on top of this, we managed to fit hybrid lights, which are half IR, half white light. So these were placed around the building and put on the network. And this then integrated into a system as well. So what it allowed them to do is produce a full-on system that would allow them to respond to any alert within a timely manner. So if the perimeter did detect someone, then they could send someone out within a 10 to 20 minute time scale, which, as I mentioned in the earlier answer, is around the time where you need to be getting someone out to it. So yeah, it was cost effective. It meant they didn't have to do too much work on site. It took 2-3 days to finish the actual project, and it gave them all the monitoring they needed. So for them, it worked perfectly.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So could you clear up some common misconceptions and explain when illuminators are necessary versus when they may be overkill?
Yeah, so this is a shaded area really within the market, because camera companies are claiming now that they've got IR, they've got white light, they've got analytics, and really there is no need now for additional lighting. This is very probably a case in domestic, which I agree, domestic is smaller. I wouldn't agree in some larger properties in darker areas. And I think the key with IR lighting and white lighting is certain cases it needs to be used to enhance the camera's ability. And I think that's where we're now going is that we're not saying cameras aren't good and the analytics aren't good. What we're saying is we can help them. So I have conversations with many installers, and the key question I ask is, do you ever have any problems with analytics? And the common answer is, well, yeah, at night in dark areas. And this is where our IR can help. So what we're trying to do is enhance that facility to gather that image. And if we can do that through ours, the problem with a camera is it is a small platform, and they're having to fit in the software, the processing power, the IR, the white light. There just isn't enough power or facility within that casing to do everything properly. And the worst case scenario is heat for what IR is the worst case scenario. What we also find with our IRs is that some unknown cases where a lot of people moan about spider webs on the cameras. And that is purely because of the heat that the IR creates within the camera. If we can put an additional IR away from the camera, we can take them spider webs down to there and give that camera a clear view. And it sounds silly, you would never think of that, but it is a common bugbear to a lot of installers, is people moaning about spider webs causing false alarms. So there's additional benefits with it. The white light, we're now finding white light being used more as a deterrent. So this is where we're finding white light is key. So we can now activate that upon detection. So the IR and the white light work together. So the IR is increasing the detection on the cameras, and then the white light can highlight and deter people. So yeah, I think that's it. I think overkill in domestic, I think crucial in commercial and dark areas. So if out in the country, I've had many houses where the camera's not picking up a person.
Yeah.
You add an IR and it works straight away.
Yeah, of course, because you don't have any like street lights in the homes and countries, and where I live, we live in the middle of a park, and we get spiders all the time over our ring doorbell thing, and it just covers it, and obviously then it's like going off all the time, and then it's like it's the whole problem of like false alarms, because you don't want to check it if it keeps popping up because you just think that it's a bug or it's your dog or something. You know, it is a problem in those circumstances.
I think that's the key. False alarms, or unwanted alarms as they're called, are the worst things ever. Yeah. Because if you get too many over a period of time, you do just stop checking, because you just presume it's next door neighbour's cat or it's spider webs. So that is key.
Brilliant, thank you. So do you think detection-only systems might become more common in the future instead of full video camera videos? And what should drive that change, and what would limit it?
I think we are finding detection systems becoming more popular. And again, we're seeing a lot of them working together with camera systems. So we potentially maybe not seeing them take over camera systems, but we're seeing people using them to work with camera systems. So if you can get a double positive, then you know that's a definite intruder. And I think that's where people are using it. But we're already seeing detection systems taking over. So you see a lot of these pods now. And even though they do have a camera on, they are just a snapshot. So they aren't a full recording system. And you've seen a lot of the pods which use detectors to detect people around the site. I think that what will drive this is predominantly cost. Yeah. So I think detection systems can be cheaper because we're not putting towers up, which can be a high cost. We're not having to get cameras out to perimeters, and it can work on that. But I think a limit to where we're going to get detection systems as the primary is just of the information that's sent out there. So we've got some very big camera companies that will argue that cameras are the way to go. We've got integrators and installers that will always suggest cameras because that's what they're used to. But a key one to me is, and I always argue this one, is what are we using that information for? So do we just want an alert? Do we want an image? And the amount of times I go out to companies and they show me a video of someone stealing some cabling. I go, all right, so what did you do with that? Well, nothing. We just saw them steal it because no one's actually monitoring it. And I think that is key to all of this, is how is that alert going to be actioned? Because if all you want to know is someone's on site and I'm going to have to check it out, then a detection system will do that perfectly. If you want to record and check that someone's there, then a camera system does that very well. But again, if someone's wearing a balaclava, you can't use that as evidence. And if you're going to do nothing with that alert, then it doesn't really work at all.
So when you say that, it can detect someone's on site, how would it be able to tell the difference between, for example, like we was talking about, if it was like foxes or if it was like a person?
Yeah, so obviously GJD have been, and I can only work on what we do, is we've been going for just over 30 years. And the key to that is our technology's developed, and our detectors, we can adjust them to suit the environment. So if we don't want to detect wildlife, we can exempt certain sizes. We also base our technology around a human's heat. So the mass of a human's heat, we can kind of identify that that's potential. You will always get cases where gatherings of animals can represent a very similar heat space, but what we find is that, and we have always found, is that monitoring centres will recommend our products because we reduce unwanted alarms to a minimum. And that is all we can ever do. Nothing is perfect, but we can pretty much guarantee that we will detect a person and we can dismiss animals.
Brilliant, thank you. So how do you see AI improving in the coming years to work more intelligently with illuminators and detection?
I think AI is developing so quickly, and people state that it can do certain things. And again, as we mentioned, analytics is great, but it does have its downfall because it can only work on what it's given. So whether it's an image, how high quality that is, and the contrast. But I think that what we do need to look at with AI is how we solve certain issues. So at current, there's problems with drones. How do we determine, just as what we just mentioned then, so how do we determine that's a drone, that's a fox, that's a wolf? How can we start using AI to actually find them problems? So if someone came to us and said, well, actually, I want to tell if a fox comes into my field, then we can say, well, actually, we can program that into the detector. And we know that a fox is this shape, this size, and we can determine that. And we do have that technology to a degree within laser.
Yeah.
So we can actually get a shape. We just don't have the AI technology built in yet. And that's something that potentially is going to be key. And we're finding a lot of prisons having problems with drones coming in.
Yeah.
And again, a drone, very similar to a bird. So how do you determine that's a bird, that's a drone? We can use noise potentially to know, but it's still a difficult case. That's where AI can also become a key solution in the environment. I think it's going to be more in how we process them alerts. And as I mentioned before, you mentioned that we don't always check our alerts because we just presume it's the neighbour's cat because that's what always happens, or we're getting spiders' webs. So what we need is some sort of technology now to determine what it does with that alert. So can we say, well, actually, we need to do this with that alert and make sure someone does respond to it. So I think that's a great way to use AI and a way to make it easier for people. And I think it's just a misunderstanding of how we use all this technology together.
Yeah.
And make it work together.
Yeah, 100%. Well, the person, the individual that's trying to set up a home system, for example, isn't necessarily going to know all of those things. They're going to presume a lot. If you're not in the industry, you're not necessarily going to know the nuances, are you? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the key in all of this is we are security professionals, and what we should be doing is advising on the best solution possible, whether that is alarm, cameras, detection, perimeter detection. But we do find at the moment, I find a lot of the time, we're losing that ability to advise on the best due to cost. And I think it's something that really needs to be looked at within companies and installers and intruders is, are we actually providing them the best solution? Or are we just trying to beat the next installer that's going quote a cheaper quote because they're using less equipment? And I think that's something in the industry we really need to consider is, are we still professionals or are we just going on price now?
Of course.
And I think that's going to be an interesting route.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Ben. It's been really fascinating speaking with you today, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Thank you also to our listeners for tuning in to Security Journal UK's security podcast. I've been your host, Millie Loughran. Make sure you keep an eye out for our next episode coming soon.
Thank you.